Analog phones are going to be switched off by December next year. In this video I wanted to talk about radio, including ham radio and walkie-talkies. Hi, this is Everyday Prepper, welcome to the channel. In this video I wanted to talk about various types of radio that we can use in a grid down situation or as an alternative means of communication. We've had quite a lot of talk on the channel in the comments section over the last few months about ham radio and how that could be used, the fors and againsts. So I wanted to go into a bit more detail on that as well. Now, as you may or may not know, analog telephones are going to be phased out or cut off by next December. BT, I think, are already planning or already going ahead with that, and they're replacing everything with something called VoIP, which is Voice over Internet Protocol. That's a digital voice format and requires power down the phone line, and it requires an internet connection. So what's happening is if certainly we've got elderly relatives who don't have a broadband or internet connection, and the phone companies, what they're going to do is they've said, don't worry, we'll sort it all out. They're going to install some kind of broadband connection so that they can just use their phone line over it. So they don't necessarily have to have internet if they don't use a computer, but they can just use their voice over internet protocol phone, VoIP phone, over that connection. The other question I had was, what happens if the power goes down? Because with analog phones, you don't need the power to go down the exchange, whereas these ones you do, they have to be powered, as well as the router needs to be powered as well. So the phone companies have been told by Ofcom that they need to provide at least a minimum. If the customer has no mobile phone or no reliable mobile phone signal in their area, then they have to provide them with at least up to 1 hour battery backup. And the reason they've done 1 hour seems a bit paltry, but they deemed that most power cuts are less than an hour. And they're probably right, although there are power cuts up and down the country that go on for days and days and days, and there's thousands of people without power currently. So I'm not sure quite what they do there, but that's Ofcom guidelines. So I imagine the phone providers will not go above and beyond, as always. So today we're just going to have a look at some alternative comms. Now, for us, we've got elderly relatives. One of them is quite nearby. We're in a built-up area, sort of suburban, small town. The other thing I forgot to mention is 3G on mobile networks is being phased out by next year as well. So you'll only have 4G or 2G. 2G is pretty useless. So I'm not sure how that will affect mobile signals as well. So even if there's not a power cut, if you've got if you're relying on a mobile, I think the reason for this is all the push towards 5G now. So just a couple of thoughts on alternative comms. So radio-wise, walkie-talkies. Let's talk about these. These are what you call PMRs, or personal mobile radio, and these are really, really cheap online. They're a little bit like the baofeng ham radios, and just
power on. 11.
Nice Chinese voice on there. I think you can actually change the voice as well. So these basically are UHF. They run on a rechargeable battery, and they usually come in pairs. And you can add to them. You can have several of them. And the good things about these is they have an embedded code in them that blocks out any other users. So the PMR channels, there was 8. There's now 16 main channels in the UK, all on UHF, and I think these ones are 16 channel. And anybody can use these in the UK. So if you're close enough to someone else using a pair of these and they're on the same channel, quite often you might be able to hear them talking, but you would just switch to another channel. So it's not private, it's not encrypted or anything like that, but you can talk about whatever you want to on these. You don't have to worry about what the subject matter is. Ham radio is slightly different, which I'm going to cover in a second. So these are UHF. Now, the reason I'm talking about the UHF and VHF is quite important, depending on which area of whether you're in a built-up area or in the country. So UHF is very good for buildings because it's a 70 centimetre wavelength, which is about that long. So you've got the wave fits into 70 centimetres, whereas VHF is 2 metres. 2 metres wavelength is about that, as far as I can spread my arms across, and then you've got the peak and the trough in that 2 metres. Now the difference there is as the wave travels through the air at the speed of light, the 70 centimetre one is able to bounce around buildings, bounce through windows. Most windows are, bigger than 70 centimetres, and so it can get through buildings and it can get around trees and things in a foresty area as well. Very well, it can bounce quite well. The problem we've got is because of that nature of it bouncing around, it will also lose signal over a distance. So it's not very good for long distance comms, even line of sight, although you can get pretty good line of sight up to a couple of kilometres with these things if you're direct. But eventually the signal just dies out because it's just bouncing all over the place, bouncing off the raindrops in the atmosphere and what have you. Whereas a 2 metre signal or 2 metre wave on VHF can travel over longer distances, but it can't necessarily get through windows, through doors and around buildings. So it's not as great in a built-up area. The other thing you've got to bear in mind with these, and I'm thinking, if you've got an elderly relative who's like just down the road or something like that, and they had a walkie-talkie, and they couldn't use their VoIP because they've got a power cut and it's more than an hour, and their batteries run out, they could just use a walkie-talkie, and that would probably work fairly well just down the road. The only thing that can scupper these is if there's a big hill in between. They need kind of line of sight, even if there's a building in the way. It's a bit weird. But they will travel through buildings, but they won't travel over a hill, whereas VHF is more likely to do that. Now these things, the PMR, perfectly legal in the UK. You can turn these on. You can key them, and
Power on.
Hello. I'm receiving there. There we go. So you don't need a license. You can key on these, no problem at all, because it's all contained within the system. You can't tune it to anything else. Well, that's not entirely accurate. Actually, you can, but you're not supposed to. So so you can talk on these without any kind of license or any kind of test or anything like that. And they transmit at half a watt. Half a watt power is not very powerful for a radio, although mobile phones are a lot less, or up to a couple of watts, I think, max. I'm going to cover those in a second. So the half a watt with these will get you literally just around your local area, around the shops, a few buildings down. And the reason you can't have any more than half a watt is because otherwise it would be unfair. You'd be completely dominating the conversation in the whole area, which wouldn't be right. So to make it fair for all, that's kind of the law around these. They're half a watt, and they've got set channels. With ham radio, so we've got a little baofeng like this. These are great. They're about 20 quid. You don't need a license to buy one. You can listen into the airwaves. You just can't press that button there, which is the transmit button, unless you've got a license, legally anyway. So, when I got mine, I think I tuned it into the local repeater and just keyed it just to see if I was getting the local repeater. Shouldn't do that really, because it can annoy people on the airwaves. But anyway, I'm licensed now, so it doesn't really matter. So these things they are dual band, so they will do UHF, same as the PMR radios, and they will also do VHF. UHF, with these standard UV5Rs, they will transmit at 1 watt or 5 watts, so low power and high power. Now 1 watt is double the allowance for PMR radio. So there's two things around PMR radio or around the UHF PMR radio that you can't do because of the nature of the baofeng. One is it has to have a fixed aerial, or fixed antenna. So these are fixed; they're moulded into the unit. You can't change them. You can't stick a massive aerial up on your roof and then connect these to it and transmit over because the antenna will also, if you've got the right type, will multiply the power at which you're transmitting by a fair amount. And again, you'll end up dominating the whole conversation. No builders will be able to hear themselves, or security guards or whatever that use the same thing. So with the baofeng, the problem we've got here is we've got an antenna that is detachable, because you can attach all types of antenna to these. You can attach like big tactical ones like this one, big rubber duckies. You can even attach it to a large house antenna if you want to, if you've got the right connections. So that rules out PMR. The other thing that rules it out is that these transmit even on low power at 1 watt, which is double what the legal limit is for PMR. So how you get around that is, if you have a license, then you've got the whole range of UHF amateur radio band, and there's many frequencies that you can use. So you can't use the PMR frequencies, but you can use plenty of UHF frequencies on there as well. You can also use VHF, and VHF is the 2 meter wavelength, as I said, and on both of those you can also connect to repeaters, which are basically sort of leapfrogs really, to enable you to extend your signal further and further and further to someone that you perhaps can't get directly. You go via a repeater and then they can hear you, or maybe even a couple of repeaters. So that's kind of how that works. Coming back to mobile phones are basically radios anyway, although they operate on a network, so 3G, 4G, 5G, 2G, but they are very high frequency. So UHF is ultra high frequency, which is these, but these are even higher, and the higher the frequency, the shorter the wavelength. So the mobile phone will have a really short wavelength, so it'll have signals that are just bouncing around everywhere, but it won't be able to get very far. And that's why you've got mobile cell phone towers all the way around your town, because they just don't have the power to transmit over long distances. That's basically how that works. So VHF works over a long distance. And sometimes it also can bounce, depending on the atmospheric conditions, it can sort of bounce off of that as well and get you a longer distance than you would normally get. But it's touch and go with that. You don't really know when that's going to happen. So as I said, these work on a repeater, so you can turn it on. I've got it connected to my local repeater. Radio test for over. So I was just sending a signal to my local repeater, and with this antenna, it's rubbish. I'm not really getting anything, so we'll try a different one. Radio test on low over. There we are. So we have a signal back then from the repeater just to confirm that has been received. Finally. Now, a few people on the comments have asked about getting the radio license, cost of it, how hard is it? A lot of what I've just covered there is in the test. So, there isn't a great deal more. With this high frequency, which is HF radio, which is over a 20 meter wavelength, is very different, very expensive as well to get the radios for that. But a lot of amateur radio on the foundation level is dealt with at the UHF and VHF levels. But the course that I went on was provided by Essex Ham, and the links in the description. They do a free course. It's all like video based. I think it's on YouTube and stuff. But they're brilliant. They're really good. They've got a lot of good support network as well, so you can email them and stuff and get hints and tips back. And the exam cost around £35. You get an invigilator, and the invigilators are usually really helpful too. So and they can help you arrange all of that. But I'd strongly recommend it. And then once you've done that and you've got your license, you want to get all of the repeaters in your area so that you can communicate with people further afield. And there's a great app called Repeater Book, which you can download. I don't know about on Apple, but you can download it on Android, and you can have that there and put it in your local area, and it will come up with all the repeaters that are relevant to you. And it'll give you all the frequencies and everything else, and you just program those into your phone. So you can program the phones. You've got a memory button on there as well in the menu on these baofengs. They're really quite comprehensive. But the way I like to program them is using a program called Chirp, which is you can download it free onto your computer, and then you use a data cable like this, where you just plug that into the side of your baofeng, and then you can connect it up to your computer and then do like bulk transfers of all sorts of stuff on there, and you can name each radio station. It's much more thorough than doing it just from the radio. One of the big differences with ham radio is once you've got your license, As part of the training, you will learn that talking across VHF and UHF, the conversation is supposed to be kept. It can't be encrypted, can't be coded, and the conversation is supposed to be kept to talk about radio and antennas. But I'm on several nets, and they call them nets, where you sort of chat with various people on the radio, amateur radio users, and they just talk about their allotments. They talk about their day, and they talk about their family and all sorts of stuff. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. So I reckon if you had two of you with VHF or UHF, if you basically had an amateur radio license each and you went out on a hike, I think that would be perfectly fine, because you'd be talking about the signals and the reception you're getting anyway. So no problem there. Some people have had concerns about getting a license and being on a database. To be honest, if anyone was to knock on my door, they would be asking for help, because I'm a Category 2 responder, which I've mentioned before. So the only reason they come around to me is if they wanted me to set up comms for them in either a police station or a fire station. So, but anyway, great way to practice. Really cheap and easy to get started, and could be useful as an alternative comms, especially if there's a grid down. And when I said I'm a responder, that's if there is a anticipation of a large power outage. That's what they would use to fall back on, is basically amateur radio, VHF and UHF. So that's pretty much it. Just wanted to cover radio in a bit more depth. I had promised that I was going to do that. And so hopefully we're also coming up towards 2,000 subscribers, which will be fantastic. I'm very pleased. I'm more pleased about the fact that we've got so many people that are engaged in the comments and sharing their knowledge and stuff on a regular basis, which is great. So I'd like to do something to when I hit 2,000, maybe to acknowledge those that have contributed most to the channel. I think just to appreciate and show my appreciation for you people, for you guys and girls. If you want to give me some suggestions, that would be fine. I'm more than happy to have a look at some ideas. But I'll come up with something, provided I get to 2K. Anyway, that's enough for now. If you've just come across this channel, by the way, my name is Steve. I make videos about prepping in the UK. We also cover things like solar setup and ham radio, as we just have done. If that's the sort of thing you're interested in, please subscribe to the channel, because you'll get a load more of that. Oh, and just one last thing, I nearly forgot. I got my splendid new one-man backpacking tent the other day, and I don't know if you can see the image on the front there. It's all nice and camo, so I'd be pleased to try that out. So hopefully I'm going to be throwing myself in a hedge somewhere and doing some videos on that as well. So not quite stealth camping, like on a roundabout, but it'll be kind of stealth wild camping. So I'll be trying to be hidden away. I don't want to be discovered, but it will be just general wild camping. That's what I'm looking at anyway. So in the meantime, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you soon, and stay prepared.